Merci à vous tous. On ne peut pas parler de rencontres stratégiques sans parler du rôle des écoles de management, des business schools dans ce contexte-là. Et bien évidemment, le rôle des business schools est tout à fait essentiel, puisque les business schools forment et les business schools pilotent de la recherche dans le domaine du management. Et la question qui se pose naturellement, c'est celle du lien entre la recherche et les pratiques managériales. Et pour aborder cette question-là, en conclusion, première conclusion de cette matinée, nous avons demandé à Éric Cornuel, président de l'EFMD, de nous rejoindre et de présenter ses réflexions sur cette question qui est tout à fait stratégique. Alors, Éric Cornuel salue ses professeurs de l'Université Paris-Dauphine et de l'HEC.
So, I mean, when we look at the general landscape, I think there is not a single doubt that we have entered the fourth industrial revolution. This industrial revolution has a very important characteristic. I think it's deeper and faster than any otherwise. And in particular, it affects all the continents due to the digitalization that has taken, let's say, a very important place in terms of disruption and driving force. 20 years ago, roughly 1% of the world population had an access to the internet. Today, we have 62%. So you imagine all these people being at the same time actors and observers of what's going on. I'm fast because I know I've only 15 minutes. There is no doubt that this fourth industrial revolution and the digitalization component have increased in a way our satisfaction. I mean, look at how you book a taxi online, a pizza, how you order anything, or let's say we saw again the main improvements that we have had in medicine. I've put a cyclotron here. You know that the proton therapy has been a major move forward in terms of fighting cancers, etc., etc. But actually, even though we had a number of very interesting progress, labor markets are deeply disturbed. I mean, on this picture you see two people, and again it's gender balanced. You know that if you take the United States, for instance, the #1 job for men is, that's very difficult, truck driver. So you have 3 million guys running on the highways all year around. However, what will happen in less than 10 years when the self-driven cars produced by Daimler and others will take over? What are we going to do with these 3 million people? And that's the same with the assistants. You know that more and more we have virtual assistants. By the way, it's a catastrophe. And I mean, the assistant can be a male or a female. Don't worry. I mean, I'm not again. I'm very strong feminist. So, but those people, what are we going to do with them? And I think it's a huge question. And of course, politicians, as usual, they do like ostriches. They just bury their head in the sand and they wait that let's say this revolution basically swipe a number of things out. Other negative aspects, I mean, here I've taken the picture of the first no-employee supermarket that was launched in Seattle by Amazon. Nobody. Okay, so, I mean, Carrefour, you've seen certainly that, has also fired 2,500 people to go digital. And in industry, it doesn't necessarily look better. I remember the quote from Karl Bass, the CEO, the former CEO of Autodesk, saying that the factory of the future will have just 2 employees, 1 man and 1 dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to prevent the man from touching the equipment. So this is something that is becoming a reality, and that obviously impacts us all. Other risks, of course, are connected with this general process of digitalization, let's say, being the foundation of this fourth industrial revolution. GAFA invades our privacy almost every day, as you all know, and very often make mistakes with it. I mean, remember the case of Cambridge Analytica, for instance, or I'm sure you have received very regularly emails from one of your providers saying, sorry, somebody has basically penetrated our system and we don't know whether your data have been violated or not. You know, it's becoming a bit disturbing to see this kind of things. In addition, I remind you of the fact that we have the GDPR, but it's certainly not enough. We certainly need much bigger digital safety belts to protect us. Finally, I took the liberty of putting the World Health Organization logo for a very simple reason. You know that stress has been declared by the WHO as the epidemic of the 21st century. And we are encountering unprecedented levels of stress. And in particular, not among us, almost all of us are integrate migrants, but about internet-born generations, the millennials. And the American Sociological Association did a very interesting research demonstrating that the millennials have the highest levels of stress ever. And we perfectly know that stress is connected with cardiovascular disease, hypertension, obesity, and certainly cancers. Okay, so that's, I mean, doesn't look very, very good. I mean, now let me talk a bit about inequalities. Definitely, the huge period of growth that we have witnessed has managed a decrease in poverty, and we have to recognize that capitalism in the past 20-25 years has taken close to 1 million people out of deep poverty, and in particular in Asia. And in Asia, the middle class is growing, there is no doubt about it. However, in parallel, concurrently, OECD countries are not looking so rosy. If you take wages, here I'm talking about wages, salaire, not income, but wages in real terms have not really increased in the past 30 years, at least not at the same speed as the economic growth, and obviously this has been done in favor of capital returns. And I stop you here, I'm not a Marxist at all, but the reality is that 8 people in the world have the equivalent wealth as the 50% poorest. So, I mean, there is an element of ethics also to be considered here. All the more so because I'm sure you have read just like me, that in the United States, life expectancy, United States, yes we can, biggest country in the world, we are the strongest in the world, 31 months we are lost since 2020. It means that an average American will die before a Cuban or an Albanian. Isn't it shocking? Isn't it surprising? I mean, to look at that. Personally, I mean, of course you can take the COVID, but I mean, you have plenty of other reasons. I mean, opioids in particular, guns. 45 million people are killed by guns every year in the US. I mean, come on. I mean, there is a problem here that will need to be solved. And of course, I mean, we ended up with these very graceful events, the COVID and the war in Ukraine, that have created a particularly turbulent environment for us, generating inflation, etc. But we have economic professors here that know that much better than I do. So, I believe that, and Romain taught me that because he was my professor, and he did a magnificent book called Le Prince Bureaucrate that I couldn't buy because it was exhausted everywhere. Yeah. And I believe that we are in the middle of a very deep crisis of legitimacy. I put Max Weber here, and you know that Max Weber has conceived a system of legal authority, a set of rules defining how we should behave, and an administration making sure that they are properly applied, and politicians being elected on the basis of these shared values. But today, when you see that we have entered the post-truth era, I think it was the word of the year for the Oxford Dictionary in 2019 or 16, even 16. I mean, you're just baffled by this situation. I mean, it means that ethics, and you have put two glorious, and of course, I apologize to Mr. Weber to have put them on the same slide. But you know, when you see these clowns who basically lied to the entire country or the entire world about let's say, the development of the society, this is particularly disturbing. So my point is, was he right? You know this man, I mean, this is Karl Marx, and this is the statue of Karl Marx that was offered by the Chinese government to the city of Trier, where Marx was born. And actually, when you look at the evolution, it was not really wrong up to now. Wages have basically been flat in real terms, in favor of capital returns. Capital returns went up through heavy speculation, mergers and acquisitions, companies buying their own shares. When I was a student, it was forbidden to buy your own shares. Well, it's not Jurassic era. Now, you know, you can buy your own shares, and we see companies doing that all the time. Until what? Until the bubble burst, put societies on their knees, and who basically cleans the écurie d'Augias? I don't know in English how you say that. But you know, who cleans that? Society. And when you go 5 or 6 years later after the crisis in the city of London, you talk to finance people, nobody claims responsibility, everything is forgotten, and you get the millions of bonuses back again, floating in the pockets of these people. Well, I think the risk we are facing is crystal clear. To end up with disenchanted societies and angry citizens, forming a precariat, you know this term that was invented by Guy Standing, it's a contraction of precarious proletariat, where actually older generations see that their children will live worse than them, not better. And it was a sort of social contract that we had for many, many decades. And people not, let's say, not looking at the future with a certain degree of optimism. In the past, when people lived perhaps with less, but at least they had a sort of safety for their jobs, now it's becoming precarious. Human resources are a variable cost and may lead to, in my opinion, very strong social movements. I've put the logo of Natixis because I'm sure a number of you know very well already that the analysis made by Artus, Patrick Artus, who is the chief economist of Natixis, and he explained how the Marxists of theory was up to now not really wrong by the fact that, and you know that Marx said that the end of capitalism would come from finance. Anyway, I mean, I let you look at that. Let me now go to business schools a bit more. When we look at our industry or profession, I believe that we are pretty much integrated in our times. We are well integrated in the technological world. You saw how we develop MOOCs, let's say virtual classes, online diplomas, you look at BSI, etc. So I think we have a certain degree of, how can I say, adaptation to the current cultural revolution. So we live, I mean, I think we are in a way a well-oiled machine. And we have, I mean, as accreditors, you know that my organization has 2 accreditations, EQUIS and the program accreditation. We have witnessed many progress, significant progress made by institutions, I mean, public universities as well as private business schools. But I think we have to recognize anyway that we are more built as institutions for execution than for innovation or experimentation. We don't like it. We like when it goes, you know, like a good set of gears, perfectly oiled, but we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. And I think one of the challenges that we have, and you spoke several times about paradigm, and I listened very carefully to your speeches, and I think they were brilliant. We need to change our paradigm. I think we have to push our reflections to mirror what happens in society. And I don't think we have yet incorporated that in our research and in our teaching. We are trying, I mean, at our modest level, accreditors, to try to speed up this process, and here you have the model of EQUIS. So we have created the concept of ethics, responsibility, and sustainability that irradiates in all the other criteria to push institutions to really integrate those dimensions to what they do in terms of research, in terms of personal development, in terms of teaching, etc. And there are many positive results, and Michel knows that very well. I'm sure he can speak for 25 hours or 24 of the results. I mean, here you have the example of Lausanne, CIBS, SOBI, etc. We are changing, but perhaps we are not changing enough, especially on this dimension, on research. The paradigm shift, I think, the most important one is to, let's say, to move to a research with a socially, don't worry, Michel, a socially responsible outputs. And we are not on that. Here you have the first page of the Responsible Research in Business and Management Network, the sort of profession de foi, first statement, saying that we must develop research that is a service to society, that involves stakeholders, and we shouldn't favor only academic research, but also applied research, multidisciplinary research, etc., etc. Well, I think we have to call a spade a spade. Research is too much disconnected with business practice. And we write papers with unclear value to practice and, frankly, often knowledge. And this is, you certainly remember that The Economist calculated that an A publication can cost up to $400,000 to $500,000, $500,000, for a publication that is going to be read by 500 persons. Is it what society asks us to do? I'm not certain, to be very frank. So, like Andrew Pettigrew said, we worked quite a lot together. I mean, he has this concept of engaged professors. For him, a professor needs to have, let's say, can take many forms. I mean, you can do very academic research, you can also work with local communities, you can publish in business journals, you can be a long-term mentor to businessmen. Everything is noble. You do not have first class, second class, and third class professors. This is an enormous mistake that we do to our own profession. Heuristic research is what I've just told you. we must change gear, perhaps by changing the doctoral programs, perhaps by influencing more the rankings, I don't know, but there are certainly many elements to take into consideration. And finally, we shouldn't forget that we have a scientific mission, but we have a societal one as well. And I think we have too often forgotten about our societal mission. And this is where I would like to stop, because otherwise Michel will not be very happy. So I've done it very quickly, but I hope you have, I mean, I've conveyed to you a certain number of elements of what I did. Thank you very much.
Well, Xavier Durand, for his book, There's a Risk. Is my English right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier.
Actually, the book exists in English, and it's called The Values of Risk. The Values of Risk. And why is it the values of risk? Because I think you'll understand as I go through this. So I realized, first of all, that I'm the last thing standing between you and lunch, so that's always a challenge. Second of all, this is a fascinating audience for me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased and honored. It's fascinating because I come from a family of academics. Everybody in my family is an academic, professor. My dad was a president of a university. And I am the stray dog, the guy that didn't go to business school. I did not want to go to business school because after Polytechnique, etc., I thought I was fed up with studying. So I went into business without going into business school. I lived 30 years working in 30 countries, running large organizations around the world, and I experienced firsthand all of the major crises that we've gone through in the last 30 years. And when COVID happened, I thought, I have to write down the problem I'm faced with and the solutions I think I have come up with as a practitioner. And I have to write a book, and this is the book, Oser le risque. The hardest thing to do was not to write the book. The hardest thing to do was to figure out what you all have published on that topic, so that at least I could refer to some background that already exists. And so I had to get some help, because as you said, you know, there's a lot of, every time you think about something, somebody has a PhD on it, somewhere on the planet. The problem is not whether that's been thought about, the problem is, can you put that to work in an effective way? Can you do something with it? And I think that's one of the themes that came here. So my book talks about a few things. First of all, let me explain, I'm running today COFAS. COFAS is a worldwide organization. We are in 100 countries. We carry 650 billion euros of credit risk on 3.5 million companies in 200 countries around the world. We make 10,000 credit decisions every day, and we do that with a lot of data, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of expertise, people all over the world that have dedicated their lives to trying to understand the risks that we face. So from that vantage point, it's fascinating, because every time there's something in the papers that is true, it impacts us. The question sometimes is to figure out whether it's true or not. So the book talks about risk and risk management, because I think in humanity, anything that creates value is about being able to control risk a little bit better than others. Anything that humanity has done that creates value is risky. Flying, making dams, nuclear, anything you can imagine is risky. Even when you were a child and you started walking, it was risky. But still, the benefits outweigh the risk. So if you can control the risk of walking well, the benefit you get from it is much better than not being able to walk. So we all took the risk, and we all fell flat on our face. The only time you have no risk is when you're dead. Right? So our job is to manage risk. And the second thing that struck me is that we are not capable of anticipating risks. We have been faced through my career with, just think of the last 3 years, COVID, 2020. It's one thing to say there will be a virus and it will come from an animal and it will originate somewhere in the jungle in in Southeast Asia, and it will come, so everybody can make those deductions or anticipations. It doesn't tell you when, where, is it going to be lethal, is it going to be transmissible, and where and how is it going to propagate through society. It doesn't tell you anything practical that you can use when you're a CEO, right? So today we are faced with incredible risks. We just went through all of them. I mean, I agree with very much of everything that's been said before, except for one thing. I do not think the past was that great. I think we tend to be a little bit romantic about the past. Because if you look at our life expectancy today versus those of the Romans or those of people a century ago, it's much better. And if you look at poverty, it's been existing for a very, very long time. So we tend to be a little romantic about the past, and I'm not necessarily sure that's true. So in my job, I came to realize that you cannot anticipate risks. Next year, is inflation going to be here, or is it going to be abated? Is the war in Ukraine going to continue? Is China going to invade Taiwan? What are the interest rates going to look like? Are we going to have a right-wing government in Italy, but are we going to have many others? Is the UK government going to tank their economy or not? Are the governments going to support companies, and is that going to be effective? Are we going to have a debt crisis? Anybody have the answer? Come and see me, because I need those answers. But there are no such answers, right? So the question is, when you can't plan it, what can you do? We have all invented technologies and techniques that you are that's what you dedicate your life to try to help us manage risk. So we have invented process management, we have invented data, artificial intelligence, we have invented compliance, we have invented, I don't know, all sorts of things, planification. And people, have built careers, and entire organizations have spent their lives, as you said, selling those technologies to people like me who are trying to control risks. It doesn't work. Why? I think you said it earlier. Because it takes 25 years to develop those technologies, but by the time they're available, I mean, we've already moved on. And they very much focus on looking at the past. And if you try to go home tonight, only looking in the rear view mirror, I guarantee it's not going to go well. And if you, after you crashed, say, you know, the problem is I need a better rear view mirror, it's not going to go well either. So as a CEO, and I'm not disputing the value of all these tools. They're very helpful. We have planification, we have process management, we have Lean, we have Six Sigma, we have, you know, all these great things, financial controls and other things. So we put them to work because they are very good at controlling risks that repeat themselves and that we've already identified. They are not good at telling us what the next risk around is that we haven't seen yet. So from there, I think I drew two conclusions. One, if you can't plan it, then you have to be able to react to it. What matters is the resilience, the agility, and the ability to collectively harness the forces and the expertise in your organization so that you can improvise, somebody said the word, improvise a solution that works. Right? When COVID happened, it was 2 weeks after we had launched our 4-year strategy plan. So we had a great investor day, we had video conferences around the world, we had, you know, it was great, right? People were, were very thoughtful. And 2 weeks later, we had to go in work from home mode globally in every country. And we did it in 24 hours. And suddenly the whole playbook was up in the air. So, so what we did is we did go work from home, and it happened in 24 hours, and it worked great. And we figured out suddenly that the technology that was available to us was actually so much more powerful than anything we had even imagined before. If I had tried to send everybody home and say, don't come to the office anymore, just before COVID, everybody would have said, you're crazy. But the reality is 20% productivity gain, lower cost, doubling of the number of client contacts that we had. Employee engagement went up 25 points. And we've never had such a great years than the last 2 years. What do you learn from this? Very interesting, right? And then basically from there I go into, if you can't plan it, if the systems that you have are not good enough to help you drive, what is it that's going to work? And I believe it's values. Values are principles of action. They are the way you think about a problem. When you look at a problem, you say, what's most important in trying to resolve it is addressing this criteria, and then the second criteria, and then this third, and then this fourth. And then people everywhere around the world will deal with the problem using that scale of reference, which is in harmony with our long-term goals. We have a strategy. We believe trade is good for the world. Now, I know that's been disputed lately because of the war in Ukraine, but still, imagine the war in Ukraine if there was no trading between Russia and the US and China, etc. It would be worse. That's my opinion. But at least there are some forces that force every player to take into account the other ones, right? So we believe trade is good for the world. We are here to help companies trade better, and that's our mission. How do we do this? We have a strategy, but we need to navigate the tactical events that will happen this year, next year, and the next years to come. And to do this, we refer to values. Our first value is clients. We have 20-year relationships with every client that we have, and we need to protect that. So when people think about a new problem, a pandemic, an election, a new law, or a new risk, or a financial crisis, they have to protect the relationship with clients. Second, we are experts. We know something because we've been doing this for a century that other people don't know as well. And we need to continuously build and apply that expertise. Number three, we are global. People need to collaborate. So collaboration, because only putting minds together gets you a better solution than having one. So we have to be able to, as a company, apply the knowledge of different people to resolve every question that's asked. And finally, we have to have courage, because every decision we make is imperfect. We do not have all the data we need to make decisions. So we make the best possible decision that could be made, and sometimes we get it wrong. And if we get it wrong, it's okay, as long as that mistake does not sink the whole organization. So I wanted to put that in a book, which is basically what I did. It also means it has profound implications on the management culture, because it means accepting to say, I don't know what the future looks like. I do not know how to resolve all these questions. I have 5,000 people with me in the company that will try to do that the best they can, but we have to be extremely aware of what's out there. So we cannot, it's not a top-down organization, it's very much a network. And I have to accept that. And I have to foster a culture that helps that to build. And I took, just to conclude, I took an example, because I'm a musician and I was trained as a classical musician, and I became a jazz player, and I've been playing in jazz clubs for 30 years. And I compare in the book what happens in a classical orchestra with what happens in a jazz ensemble. In a classical orchestra, you take 60 or 80 musicians who have spent their entire lives studying one instrument and doing that perfectly. Can you imagine the cost? That in itself is expensive. Then we built a concert hall with architects, superb materials, a lot of public subventions. And we have a public that pays maybe, I don't know, a third of the price of what this is worth. And they're all very well dressed. Nobody cuffs. Nobody talks. And then we have a chef that directs everybody, like I'm today, and can point to this guy or to this guy here and say, it's your turn, and and directs everything. That is not real life. It does not work that way. It's way too expensive. We cannot run the world that way. In a jazz club, you get in and there's a bunch of people, they're having pizza, they're having beer. It's kind of smoky sometimes, it's noisy. The sound's not great. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, you never know. And then you meet other musicians that you have met before or you have not, to play something that's kind of sketchy. And you're supposed to make something happen. And if you stick to the safe zone, it's going to be boring. And people are going to say, yeah, they're not very good. So you have to take risks if you want it to be interesting. So somebody's going to go out on a limb and is going to invent something a little crazy, and the rest of the team is going to have to do something with it. So you have a lot of listening actually happening, a lot more listening than playing. And sometimes you take risks to fail, and it doesn't work. So there needs to be a leader that brings everybody back and maintains an appearance, at least, of continuity. And I think that looks a lot more like real life. I mean, this is what it feels like to be a leader in this world, which is a little crazy. So, so back to the dialogue that's been happening today in this room. A lot of great things that is being done by the academic world that is helping companies. I think we need and we buy and we thrive to always look for the next technique, the next technology that's going to allow us to control that element of risk a little bit better. And at the same time, a realization that it cannot not be the only answer, and we have to find ways to make do with whatever is in front of us as it happens. So thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.